So we're ready to roll. Ryan, you want to do the roll call?
Sure. Do the roll call. John Hammer.
I am here.
Carol Dunn is here. Doug Cohen is here. Kirk Souther is here. Emily Tracy is here, and Kathy Worthington is absent.
Good morning, everybody.
Good morning, John.
Yeah, sorry I can't be there with you today, but John, go ahead and jump in here.
Good morning. Thank you, John, for the opportunity to just briefly chat with you all. I'd much rather be with you there in person, but I am, my wife's having knee surgery today, so I'm here with her. But I do want to just share, in case you all hear or see or get questions, on your April bill, you're going to see a credit. And that this credit is in response to the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act. So when that occurred a couple of years ago, it lowered the corporate tax rate. And so that is the taxes that had been accumulated or had been anticipated are being given back to customers in a couple of different buckets. One was done a year ago, one is coming up now in April. So I just wanted you to know residential customers will receive, and this is a one-time credit, but they'll receive $7.07 as a credit on their bill. Small general service customers will receive $14.59. Large general service customers will receive $372.38. And then the really large customers like a Wholesome, they'll receive a credit of $13,295.13. And I know that the last time this credit came out, several people had questions. We got lots of calls, and so just wanted this group to be informed ahead of that billing cycle. Thank you.
John, you're on mute.
Thank you. I've got a grandfather clock that goes off right on the hour, so I kind of tend to mute around that. Thank you, John. That's good. That's good to know. Is it too late to get in that large commercial category?
Unfortunately, I don't think you'll want to be there, John, but it would be nice to get the refund.
I hear you. Thank you. So that was John is the only citizen that I see present. I don't see anybody else in the room. And so what we're working on today is our recommendation document for council. And we've got, so what I sent everybody, Emily does have a recommendation. Emily, did you send that to everybody? I forgot to look.
Yes, I did. And we have it as part of our packet here in person too.
Great, thank you. And Carol sent in some recommendations, and Doug sent in some recommendations, and I did. Kirk, did I miss yours or?
I read some of it, and I thought quite a bit of what I had covered is there, and I think I've written quite a bit already that has been presented as far as a roadmap goes. So
Great.
I think that I can incorporate with what we have here. So there was no need for me to add something different.
Okay, that sounds fair. How would you like to do this? Would you like to go through each of the recommendations or discuss ones that stand out to you or make a particular point about anything?
Well, I think if we went with John's and Emily's two documents, because quite a bit of it is overlapped. So I think it would be easy to go through that and discuss the two of those together and see what everybody thinks. Is that okay? Because, and then I think Carol's recommendations are separate and unique, and then Doug has his set of recommendations too. So
yeah,
but I think those two, yours and Emily's, have a few similar statements to them.
Okay, great. One thing I'd comment on is that Emily, both Emily's comments and my comments or recommendations have kind of a similar theme, and that involves municipalization. But one thing to keep in mind is that the charter does have specific steps. The city charter does have specific steps that the council will have to go through to go down that path, and that includes before anything is taken to the voters, having a complete plan for operations, for costs, for bonds, for borrowing, all that kind of stuff. So that's important to recognize as we go through here. Emily, did you have anything special on yours that you wanted to cover?
Let's see, the last two that I added were just kind of like needed to be said, I think. But I hadn't included in my earlier version. So number 6, that the city should not place a franchise renewal proposal on the city ballot at this time while the city is still exploring options. And number 7, my recommendation regarding the committee itself, that it should not be dissolved by council at this time. Again, we've developed quite a bit of expertise among the people on the committee, and certainly it makes sense to pause from time to time when there's not specific agenda items, but I don't want to disband the committee. That's my opinion anyway. Other than that, I think everyone's seen the rest of what I had.
Okay. So as we put this document together, I'm struggling with the idea of either going through and voting on each recommendation or not, or I think that this is an important enough topic, and there's enough range of opinion that we should not necessarily exclude a recommendation. But so maybe what we should do is talk about is split the document kind of into 2, where we have recommendations agreed to by a majority of the committee, and then other recommendations that individual members felt were important. How does that sound?
I think that could work. Maybe we just need to go through all of them and then see how that breaks out. I mean, for example, the 2 that Carol has, I don't want to leave those behind because I don't think we covered them another way, but and Doug, of course, has a list here too. I don't know. I'm not sure what others think. If you could almost put it all together in one document and then see, are there duplicates? Are there things that just don't fit for some reason or whatever?
Well, we could, just thinking about it in general here, we could, if we wanted, we could also prioritize the recommendations. But that still involves essentially the committee agreeing on what the priorities are. And we've got kind of the same issue, I think, or process that we'd have to go through to be able to agree on overall recommendations and then have individual recommendations or something like that.
Can I add something here?
Sure.
I think we maybe need to go through the recommendations, not necessarily read each one and have council. I mean, get a general list and then have council prioritize it.
That's a good point, Doug.
That's good.
Any other thoughts on that? That sounds to me like maybe that's the best. We don't, even if we put all of these together, what are we going to have, a 2-page or 3-page document?
Well, we've almost got, a lot of these things are on those list of goals that we had, and some of them almost look to me or strike me as being almost a timeline type of thing, you know. I guess Ryan's working on getting, somebody to do the, to analyze the system. And so basically that's what's top of the list right now, and putting together something for, focus groups, that might be on your list too. And then where we go from there, it's almost like a flow chart type situation too. Because some of these things are, you know, not going to happen until we get the results of these two items that Ryan's been tasked with.
Yeah, I think that's a good point, that maybe if we think of this in terms of a timeline, there'd be some, excuse me, some things that are just overall general comments, but also some things that would happen on a timeline, one thing before another. That might be a good way to structure it.
I have a little bit of a, not an issue, but a thought. As far as, Carol, did I understand you right, a focus group?
Well, that's what
That's council
council talked about, because I think Ryan was tasked with finding someone to do a focus group so that council will know what the populace is thinking before they go much further down the line in any municipalization process. Or just get ideas from people as to, you know, what they think about where we are, where we've been, where we might go. That was actually not me.
So yeah, I hear you, Carol. The, I think the focus group was in relation to, you know, whether we want to pursue the course of municipalization or not. I think it was kind of, you know, intended to help answer that question, because for sure, you know, if I recall the discussion correctly, for sure, we don't want to suggest municipalization to the voters where council and maybe this committee thinks it's a really good idea and have it rejected because we haven't done our homework, you know, and so that was kind of in the homework category, I think.
Well, and we can do, in doing that, excuse me, John, in doing that focus group, you can find out the holes that we need to plug with education, you know, because like the franchise question that you guys have brought up many times. Well, and the one in Pueblo too, apparently people were told and believed that their electricity was going to be turned off if they go to municipalize. So, you know, I think a focus group could show us where we're lacking in information to the general public.
Sure. And that can be a recommendation, you know.
That brings me to the point of, I think whatever is presented definitely needs to be factual and not some people's opinion.
Doug, do you have an example of what your concern is in that area?
Well, let's take like Pueblo. I don't know here because we haven't taken it to the public, but some people were led to believe their power would be turned off. And that wasn't the case.
No.
Oh, of course.
So those kind of rumors do not need to be floated around, in my opinion.
Right, well, I think what Carol was talking about was when, and correct me if I'm wrong, when Pueblo had their vote in spring of 2020, that there was a lot of misunderstanding about what they were voting for or
Right.
against.
Yeah.
I think.
So I think that behooves us to make sure that the voters know
Right,
what they're voting for and not just
right. I agree. And I-
some people's, including myself, some people's ideas of it. It needs to be out there factual, not hearsay. This is important
Well, I
stuff.
think we all have to go into the grocery store and face the public if we tell them lies, Doug. So I don't wanna go there, you know, because people are smarter than we think they are sometimes, and they'll see that, like, wait, you said this and this isn't the way it is, and so I totally agree. There's no sense in putting out misinformation.
No,
And I think it's worth adding to this, that ever since our vote in Canyon City in November of 2020, I know that council from time to time, at least some council members have talked about, you know, sort of thinking out loud, what did that vote mean? Did people really know what they were voting on? But I always get a real nervous when people speculate that maybe the vast majority didn't know what they were voting on. We don't know that because we've never gone back to the public as a city to really explore that. And so that's a piece of, I think, what needs to happen.
Hence the focus group, to find out what
Exactly.
really are they.
you know, I guess that's kind of what irritates me is when a vote doesn't go the way that people think it ought to. They say, oh, well, the voter didn't know what they were voting on. Well, maybe they did.
Right? Exactly.
So there is a way to handle this. And the way to handle it is to put our recommendations together. And then Doug, because I imagine at some point we're going to have a document that'll be distributed to each of us for review. And so Doug, when we do that, make sure that you use that filter to go through and look at what we've got to see if you think there's something that doesn't appropriately belong in the document or something like that. Because what I imagine is that after this meeting, we'll put together a document, we'll send it out for review, and then perhaps we can have an online discussion about what's next after the, if we get to the point where we agree on a document. If we don't, perhaps we need another meeting, but if we do end up with a document through review that we can submit to council, then we'll do so. But so keep that in mind, Doug, as we review the document that I hope we get to here.
Let's review. Let's start reviewing.
Yeah.
So
I mean, we could talk for 2 hours and not even look at any of the recommendations, so.
the one other point, Kirk, I'd like to make is that I think that maybe one way to start working on the document is to look to see where we have a commonality of recommendations and maybe combine those. Maybe perhaps lead off with those where the committee seemed to agree substantially or whatever metric we want to use on these recommendations. And if there's commonality, do some combination. So
And that's what
yeah,
I
so you want to jump in then?
That's what I had mentioned earlier, that you and Emily have some,
Yeah.
couple of them that are very similar that could probably be combined.
Yeah, sure.
Your number one and Emily's number one are quite similar. I think we need to read them. Emily had the city should contract for a third-party assessment of poles and wires plus substations and or other electrical utility infrastructure within the city limits. And then John's number one was the city needs to determine if Black Hills has lived up to their certified responsibilities by investigating electrical service lines and equipment servicing the city. Accordingly, the city should have a third party with appropriate credentials assess the condition of the system, including the inventory age and serviceability of system components, e.g. poles, wires, transformers, and switches.
Yeah, I think they can meld.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I think those two can, and we've been talking about that all along. So I think everybody's in agreement with that.
Well, and Emily's number 4 and John's number 3 seem to be fairly similar. Do you want me to read those out loud, Kirk?
Yeah, let's go ahead.
Okay, John's number 3 says, and I may be wrong, but I think they kind of are similar. The city should conduct a referendum on the advisability of municipalization and or partnering with a local cooperative, considering what a bordering cooperative is currently billing their customers, 2/3 of what Black Hills charges for 700 kilowatt per month. And then Emily says, if a viable partner, which might be able to assist the city with municipalization, that option should be fully explored. The city should not go to the ballot regarding any potential change in the provider unless there's a concrete proposal that's been discussed thoroughly with the community beforehand, which goes to John's suggestion to do a referendum, and then partnering would be, you know, what she says about, we might be able to find a viable partner. So those kind of, if they were reworded, I think they could go together.
Let me ask a question. Does the majority of the committee have a tendency to lean towards municipalization?
I have no opinion on that because I don't have the facts.
Right.
Me too.
And I really think, and I think I put it in here somewhere, but whatever. I really think that we won't know the answer to that question unless the city at some point decides to spend some money on an independent assessment of that question. I don't think, and Ryan, if I'm wrong, you can say so, but I don't think city staff is who we would want to do that.
No.
So they don't have that authority. That's as good as your pay grade is, that's above it.
I would agree with that.
And we can make a recommendation and it's not up to us whether the recommendation is followed or not. It's
Right,
a
right.
city council decision. So
Right.
those are the types of things that we need to bring up and say, hey, if you really want to know
Mhm.
this option, if there's an option out there, you're gonna have to spend some money,
Yeah,
and here's what you would have to do.
Right, that's.
You know, and that's
let's
That's where-
change, spend some money to invest.
Yeah, yeah.
Because that's what it will be.
Yeah.
Upfront costs.
Yeah.
In order. They.
You're evaluating the
Yeah.
investment.
Right, right.
And I would recommend there on Emily's number 4 that rather than saying a concrete proposal, say a comprehensive proposal. Because that's really what the
Yeah.
charter requires. And go on to say that to expand the discuss, include the idea of analyzing and evaluating whether we're in compliance with the charter, whether we have all of the parts and pieces that the charter requires for such an undertaking.
Timeline.
Did we not have a company, or did a company not come in and supposedly do an assessment?
No.
Maybe not a full assessment, but assessment of the system?
I don't think we can talk about that, but I know the attorney at one point in time, he'll keep us on track with the charter. I believe, through council. Yeah. So that's one of your steps. After the focus group and the evaluation of the system, then you go and say, okay, do these facts fit in with what city council and the charter can do? That's the way I see it, not knowing anything about city government. But that makes sense.
So those two really are very similar, and I think that they can work together really good.
Yeah.
But I think we need to go back to number 2, because number 2 needs to be done before you can get to number 3.
Right, exactly.
And both of your number 2s are very similar. John, the city should prepare plans and budgets to demonstrate cost of municipalization and or partnering with a co-op, both short and long term, using the best professional judgment scenario and a reasonable upper limit for costs. And Emily, if the city wants a comprehensive understanding of the costs and process to municipalize it, it will need to contract for an independent evaluation conducted by a qualified third party. So those two are basically saying the same thing,
Yeah, right.
and they would have to come before your referendum too.
Oh, absolutely.
Sure. Absolutely.
So I think.
So do we
those
have
two-
any? Go ahead, Kurt.
I think those two are very well put together.
And
Great.
then, Emily's number 5, I think answers, John's desire, concern that the charter should be consulted. So that would be, where would that fit in the timeline?
This number, my number 5 is more having to do with the piece of city code about intervening in. rate
Oh,
cases.
I'm sorry, I didn't read
So-
far enough. All I saw was city
We
code.
probably need both those things.
Yeah, yeah, the charter language.
So we've got through the first 3 of both Doug and Emily's, right?
No, John's.
No, we have with,
John.
with Emily's, we got number 3 we haven't talked about.
Okay, but we've got through number 1, number 2,
And number
number 4.
Yeah, my 3 is more, you could fold it into the idea of hiring a consultant to do an analysis of, can the city save money kind of an analysis. We fold that in because it's about looking at, well, what's your time frame you're looking at? You might not be able to save money in 5 years, but can you in 10 or 15 or whatever? So that could get folded into a larger, let me see here. Yeah, like the number 2.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking.
Folded into the number 2. I think that was.
Your number, what?
My 3,
Your 3 could be folded in.
into the combined 2s or whatever.
Oh, okay.
So Kirk, do I take it that you're gonna give a shot at this document? Is that right?
I knew that. Am I a consultant?
Yeah.
I
Thanks
see
for
your
all
business
your
card.
free consulting here.
I think, John, your number 4, I don't know if that really fits. That just sort of sounds like, hey, if anybody wants to pay attention to things at the state. I don't know if that, either it should be reworded or doesn't fit in with a recommendation to council. I'm thinking.
Sure, understand. That was more of a parenthetical comment rather than a
Yeah.
recommendation. That's true.
Although, we could make it, I don't know, we could change it in some way so that the city in some way does that. Because I do think it's important. I personally have learned a lot in the last few months by sitting in on a variety of hearings and making comment in a few of them.
You could say, well, we're doing all these other things. In addition, we need to know what's going on in the state
Yes.
and the feds and,
Right.
and you could maybe fold my comment about collaborating with other communities into that whole thing. That's kind of like overarching or underpinning, or I don't know, for just general,
I think that would be good. You could combine those.
yeah,
It's communication and
just awareness. of what's
collaboration
going on.
right? Reaching out, connecting,
Yeah.
whatever, but yeah, that could all fit together.
That all sounds good. Anything, Doug, that you see that needs to be a particular recommendation?
I don't know if I see anything in particular. I'm getting a feeling that we're still out there enough that I don't know if we can move forward. But I know we need to. I know that we can't stay here forever.
I would say that the recommendations that we're making right now gives the potential of either moving ahead or not doing anything. I mean, we're at the point right now where we recommend these things. If the council wants to pursue it, they can spend money and they can pursue and they can actually find out, is this a good thing or is it not a good thing? If they don't spend the money, we're never gonna know. So we're at a point right now where the recommendations need to be made, decisions need to be made by the city council. And then we'll know. We'll know one way or the other what the city council wants to do.
Yeah.
In reference to actually finding out, is this a viable alternative for us? Which is one of the tasks that we were given.
And we're at the point where oh, I'm sorry, John. I can't see your mouth move. And we're at the point where we've gone as far as we can. We can't put out any money as a committee to find out these things. And we've done lots of research, given you lots of information, lots of direction perhaps. Lots of sources for information. And now it's falls in your court because you are the ultimate decision makers.
So what I've gathered, what I've heard here today, the word that's come up most is municipalization. So
There aren't too many other alternatives.
there's
Well,
three
unless-
alternatives. here.
Unless we stay with Black Hills Energy. And then do we have enough leverage to say, look, you've got to lower our rates?
With
Yeah, we don't have any leverage of that.
No. The second alternative is a co-op and Saint
Right, but
Isabel
the only,
Saint Isabel already tried to buy them for 1.1
Yeah.
billion.
right,
And they are not forced to sell.
right.
So the only alternative we have is the municipal. So that's
Only
why we're-
alternative from what we presently have.
Yes, yeah, well, yeah,
Yeah,
Or,
alternative means something different.
yeah, I'm well aware of that.
Yeah, well,
So the, in that evaluation by council, that will also include whether there is an ongoing role for this committee or not. Keep that in mind too.
well, and according to our charter, John, review, evaluate, and make recommendations concerning energy options. If we've done that and we feel that we've fulfilled those goals, those jobs that we were given by council, then yeah, our work here is done.
Except I see
Except,
it a little
No, I
differently
know.
in that there is a changing landscape out there and conversations still pop up from time to time. So, it makes sense to me to not dissolve the committee, but to have periodic pauses and another alternative would be to amend the resolution that established the committee to broaden its scope. We just created a really not what I think is going to be a really good water committee for the city with city council members not yet designated and community members that have been selected now. Congratulations, Doug.
Thank you.
Yeah, good. And so, I do think that this is an area that the interest and the need isn't going to go away and isn't just about Black Hills. So it's just something to think about. As things change, for example, as the state is pursuing their electrification goals around transportation and buildings, I don't see the need for a committee like this going away. As solar technology and other technologies improve and change, it might be that on an ongoing basis, the city can benefit from an advisory committee. So I'm not saying any one thing has to happen at this point, just something to think about.
And so I think that should be couched in those kind of terms. I'm not sure that I'm ready to support the committee just automatically going forward. But the case can be made in these recommendations of why, we have some feelings and some reasons for the committee to continue in operation. And if we're going to do that, we should flesh out a little bit of what role the committee should perhaps could follow with council's direction. There's a lot to be said there. One of the problems that I see is that the state is absolutely crazy to pursue electrification without expanding generation capacity, reliable generation capacity. And so there's going to be some big differences in how we view what the committee should do going forward. So that needs to be recognized too, because I am not on the green energy bandwagon. I think it's a foolish undertaking. I think it will cost more in the long run, and it will lead to a lowering of our living standards by pursuing that with the technology we have at this time. Of course, there's always the ability and possibility that improvements can be made in the technology, but nonetheless, just completely endorsing the direction the state is going on, I think is nuts.
Well, and we can talk a lot about this, and it's a general energy issue. Personally, I'm in this interesting personal predicament now where my little old house here in Kansas City has not had much attention literally for decades. So I'm starting to improve some things. I'm planning to put in a tankless hot water heater, and I'm choosing gas, even though gas is not only volatile, but the price is also volatile. I'd rather sort of over time convert to electricity, but I don't feel like I can do it with our prices here. So it's affecting my personal decision. And I think in the long run, if the state and maybe others, I don't know about the federal government, but if the state continues down this path of electrification, we've got to really seriously think about, well, what's the impact going to be on people in this community, on city government itself? What's going to happen with natural gas? If fewer people over time are using it, then does the price skyrocket even more? So there's a lot to look at. And, one thing I always think about is what can the city do theoretically? I mean, maybe price is always going to be prohibitive, but what things could the city do to kind of prepare for these changes that are coming? And what decisions can and should we make? And I personally feel like it would be helpful to have an advisory committee ongoing with those kinds of things. They may not happen quickly, or they might.
Well, and of course, the makeup of the committee will determine what route the committee would take, which is, of course, up to council. But the issue is, Emily, is that if we want government to supply all the answers, I don't think we can afford it. And if we let government be in charge of the free market system, where costs are determined, where costs are determined, and the free market type activities, it's going to be pretty difficult, because we are on the state, the governor, the legislature has put us on a path, and it's one that I don't think is really best for us as citizens. So those are all things to consider.
And what we have control of is local government. So we really have to think about what we want to do here and what we need to do here. We can't control what's happening at the state or federal level very well.
Can I bring something up about this, as far as potential things that the Energy Committee possibly could do in the future? I went back to Emily's number 3. The city could continue to explore all potential avenues which could result in lower electricity costs for residents and businesses in the city. To me, that fits under a potential activity if the committee was to continue.
Yeah, another side of that, may be the evaluation, it would, if we're hiring professionals to evaluate the system, if we're hiring professionals to do polling and market research, market studies and things like that, having the committee to assist and provide input on those activities would, at least in the short term, may be a viable.
So assist
I
with,
think that's a real good idea.
And maybe output into the community as well.
can you,
Right.
Assist with evaluation of any of the recommended activities.
Can I make a comment here for a couple minutes? Emily, I have on-demand hot water heat in my house. I have electric, I have a mini split system. I have 3 different forms of heat to include wood and coal cook stove. My utility bills are still high. I'm not so sure that I want, like John, the government didn't go to work for me for 40 years. I'm not so sure I want them telling me what I can use and what I can't use.
Well, we're not doing that here,
Yeah.
right? So that's the good news. We're not telling you.
that's the framework that we live in.
Right.
I mean,
Well,
government is set to make rules for people and, that's just what the government here locally or at the state level have made.
And then the other piece of it, I wish I remembered the number, that there's the new generation around the country that's being created is substantially renewably produced power now. Like in the last year, I can't remember the percent, but a really substantial percent of new generation is. And in Colorado, okay, we've got our portfolio standards that kind of drive what utility companies have to do. But each state is different, and if that's happening around the country, maybe the fact that fuel is free has, some influence on where that's going. So it's sort of like the old buggy whip story, how long do we want to hold on to being in charge of the buggy whips?
But is it really free?
The
We
fuel
have,
is.
the sun is basically free. Wind is basically free. Neither one are extremely dependable, and it costs a lot of money to build the infrastructure to use it.
Well, the infrastructure, mention was made a few minutes ago about the need for more generation if we're moving toward electrifying. Transmission also, we are inadequate in transmission. So I think regardless, those things are going to have to happen just because of growth, population growth. And the question is, which direction are we going to go? And are we going to acknowledge that we have to shift gears a little bit if we want to prevent continued increase in warming of our climate and drought? So we could talk about that all day, but let's get back to this.
So in terms of our recommendations, we do have our list. Kirk, do you need some more input or?
Well, I think that we've went through pretty much your recommendations, Emily and Carol's. We just need to take a look at, I can come up with some stuff, and of course, this is always a draft, so we can revise it accordingly. I want to just try to put it all together so it tells some kind of a little story, or you got your thoughts all together. But I think we need to take a look at Doug's recommendations, because we haven't really had an opportunity to do that.
Well, my 1 through 5 really, I guess, are not recommendations. They're just what I've observed through these committee meetings and what other communities have done. My number 6 my true heart of hearts says we need to continue where we're at with a definite possibility of coming to an agreement with Black Hills. Surely the city's attorney and Black Hills could come to some kind of agreement. The PUC has said one of the reasons that our energy bills are so high is because of the cold weather. That's always variable. But I'm in for my own personal thought is I'm in for an agreement for a couple of years to see how what the PUC does and all this other stuff works out.
You're talking more of a, like a agreement between staff, not going to like a franchise vote or anything.
Not a franchise, but an agreement,
Agreement between the two.
like an MOU.
Or an interim agreement.
Yes, correct. Thank you.
And that, would that come, Doug, you suppose, after we've got information from the, task that Ryan's been assigned by council to evaluate the system? Would that come out, or just, well, he's already been tasked with doing that, so I expect he has to carry through. So, you know, I mean, I guess you're probably on the road to getting that done.
Yeah, I've been reaching out and
Okay.
having some conversations
Okay.
with some different firms.
So any interim, any agreement of interim or whatever would be premature until we get that results of that study, I would say.
Well, I'm thinking, unless we just want to stay right where we're at right now, I'm thinking having an interim agreement while some of the other parts of the process are working.
What, say more about what you envision being in an agreement like that.
I'm not real sure. That's what the attorneys are for. About the time I make an opinion,
Oh, no, we don't let them decide. No.
about the time I have an idea, well, we can't do that. So
Well,
I just think that,
it's negotiated.
well, that's my opinion.
Okay,
So another way to say that, you know, keep in mind, we can walk and chew gum at the same time. It would be, I think, my personal opinion is that it's wise for the city to look at some form of interim agreement. We do have direction in the charter about city rights of ways and how they can be used and things like that. So I think there needs to be an evaluation whether an interim agreement is desirable and allowable, and what would need to go into that interim agreement. So that would be kind of a parallel, you know, in addition to the other studies and things. But that doesn't so if we're talking about a timeline, the timeline could split there where we're undertaking a couple of similar tasks, really.
And I think Doug's right as far as the city attorneys. We'll have to have them evaluate what we can actually put in an agreement. I know when the franchise was ready to expire, we asked a bunch of these types of questions, and there was concerns that if the agreement walked and talked like a franchise, that probably wouldn't fly.
I think that's an important thing to say, in that a franchise has to go to a vote, an agreement wouldn't necessarily, and so
Yeah.
that's where you get into that legal bond or whatever. Yeah.
So it would be safe saying that you have your attorney assist with evaluating to see if it's desirable, allowable to have some type of interim agreement with Black Hills as we're going through this process.
Yeah.
Something like that. Okay, that's good.
Since John doesn't know I'm here.
he's here.
Hi, John, I'm Steve Andrews here, member of the public who was not recognized as being present. So I actually wrote up a few things myself, and I don't know when would be an appropriate time to share them.
Why don't you go ahead and share? I did see you when you came in, Steve, but I did
Well,
not
yeah.
note it. I did note it on my copy of my agenda, but sure, go
Okay.
ahead. Let us know what you're thinking.
Okay, I wrote up, I did a little digging this morning and then my computer did not cooperate and I'm resisting the temptation to beat the crap out of it regularly as we speak, but anyway, I could not print anything. I haven't been able to for a week and I'm going back to the computer overhaul shop. That's a personal problem. Let's get with my recommendations. Number one, since the committee began meeting, Black Hills Energy's electric bills, going to facts, have increased thanks to increases in bill riders, not billable rates. The clearest evidence of that movement in bills lies in the trend line of CAMU's twice a year survey of statewide billing rate, or I should say bill rates. Black Hills increases have been volatile, thanks especially to the 2022 near doubling of the energy cost adjustment factor. While the ECA should have already declined, BHE's rates will still remain volatile going forward. By comparison, the rates for munis, which are close in size to Canyon City, such as Fort Morgan, Trinidad, Lamar, and La Junta, have seen more modest increases and more stability. For this reason, Canyon City should not give up on efforts to seek an alternative to Black Hills Energy's highest in the state rates. And then I have a chart which shows, and I can send this to you, a chart which shows some of the rates for those cities, 2019, 2021, a little bit of 2022 and 2023. And you know, Black Hills, the highest Black Hills went from $123 to 150. Fort Morgan went from $56 to $56. San Isabel went from 120 to 125. XL Energy went from 80 to 100. La Junta, Trinidad, Lamar, and so on. I will send this to you.
Good. And those are because of fuel.
What? No, they're riders.
Okay.
They're riders, and the ECA is the most prominent
Yes,
one.
okay, all
But it's not the only one.
right, okay.
Secondly, the city had discussions with a potential partner, Guzman Energy, which had expressed interest in assisting the city as a supplier of wholesale power, and which has a proven track record of helping other utilities in the region, in-state and out-of-state, lower their electric bills. The merits of their interest remain behind closed doors for a non-disclosure agreement. How is the public to know the merits of that offer under that NDA agreement status? I should say. Canyon City, so here's the recommendation. Canyon City should seek a means of communicating whether that expression of interest has the potential to save the public on energy bills. So that's two recommendations. Then the other two deal with, the third one is, I was suggesting exploring possibilities with another third-party player who would possibly partner with Guzman, and that would be San Isabel Electric. And I don't know if the committee ever had invited San Isabel to present, and if he did, if it was Reg Rudolph, they almost, I think he's gone, and things have changed there, and it might be worth your time to check with Ryan, the new CEO, as to how things stand and how with their interest level. And the fourth point would be, at a minimum, a number of the expenses listed by Black Hills Energy in their annual FERC Form 1 should be disallowed in terms of cost being passed on to customers. And the city should weigh in on said list of expenses at the state level through the PUC. The examples would be like marketing, since you like facts, marketing and advertising, which went from 14,000 to 800,000. Certain civic, political, and related activities is a category. And it went from 350,000 to 2.4 million. And there are a number legal. Should we be required to pay for all the people, all the attorneys who show up to make a Black Hills case at a hearing? When others can barely afford to be there, they're charging for 4, 5, and 6 attorneys to show up. I think some of those expenses should be questioned, if not disallowed. And that's in the $3 and $4 million a year category. So there are a number of their expenses. These aren't for poles and wires and substations and hardware and so on. These are for operations. But they're administrative and type, and some of those administrative expenses should really be scrutinized hard. That's assuming that you go with option, whatever it is, to stay with Black Hills. That's all I have. Thank you very much for the time.
So you'll
And
send
I
that
will-
to us?
I will. I will, John. Thank you.
That last part of what you talked about is certainly something that the PUC and the state legislature, the Joint Select Committee and others have heard about. Both in regard to Excel and Black Hills, these exorbitant costs that get built into rates because they can. Just, there's nothing to prevent it. There is, and I think I emailed out to the group, if I didn't let me know, just a late bill that was introduced, Senate Bill 291. To part of what it's supposed to do is to kind of shave away at some of these things that can be built into rates. Have no idea if that bill will go anywhere, but at least that's what the Joint Select Committee heard loud and clear, that those were the kinds of things that could be changed. And the Office of Utility Consumer Advocate has weighed in pretty heavily on all that stuff too.
Just a little housekeeping, nothing against you, Steve. Is Steve allowed to have the same input as a committee member?
I assume not.
I would assume the entire community of Fremont County can have input. And then the committee and the council can decide what they would like to do with it. I would.
Everybody
It's all
has to have
valuable,
everybody.
you know.
Okay.
He has the expertise to weigh in when many others in the community do not.
So that's something we can iron out in the document. I don't mind accepting a kind of external report or recommendations for us to evaluate. Our meetings have been open to the public, and we've got, of course, many members there in the committee room from the public that are just dying to give us recommendations. But if we certainly have some expertise here. Doug, I think it would be a little bit silly not to use that expertise as a committee, that we'll look at it and make our decisions. But I think that would be fine to accept a document like that for crunching through our process.
Should we just have him send that to us? The whole recommendations that he had?
Sure.
Yeah.
And you guys do with it as you will. I fully do not expect it to carry the same weight as internal
Well,
recommendations.
and I'm trying to think, say this, but I'll just say that all of this communication we've had in the committee with council, that there's also a piece of that, and it's not confidential to say, that there have been executive sessions about electric utility issues. And that's all I'm going to say, is that these conversations are happening in different settings and makes it a little harder.
And I would say my bottom line comment is, Steve, I'm not above stealing ideas from anybody,
Yeah.
Yeah, it just from a process standpoint, we allow, this is similar to city council and our committee meetings. We allow for, a public section to speak, and then we also allow for public comment on individual agenda items. I don't see this any different than that.
That's perfectly fine.
Yeah.
And Steve, You are, you have contributed a ton of stuff to the committee.
That could be included with the recommendations of the public input.
input,
Yeah,
And if we really want to be nice to you, we can include a comment, a footnote. Say that this is the Steve Andrews.
Maybe his CV.
Whatever you folks choose, it's just, I'll send it along. Hopefully, if my computer cooperates, it'll be soon. If not, it may be by the end of the week.
Best wishes to you,
Yeah,
yeah.
it's,
So John, maybe you were about to say that. Do we, then what are our next steps? Do we meet again to kind of go over this combined draft that is Kurt is gonna kindly put together? So that we can discuss,
So I think our next steps are to look at the draft individually, send the comments. Kirk, you'll send that to me. I'll distribute it to the committee. Send your
Okay.
comments to me. We can jointly look at comments that people have, and then we can decide from there via email whether we're going to need another meeting or not. I would guess that we probably are. It would probably be appropriate. And I would imagine that we would just do it on a regular schedule. But it'll depend on, when we see everything and all that kind of stuff.
I would prefer that we could do it at our next meeting, John, because that way it gives me adequate time to sit down and digest all of this and I don't want to just send the first draft that I have written up because I'll always revise drafts and that would help me out if we could do it that way.
and
Okay.
it might make sense. I don't know if you want to do this or not, Kirk, but I think Carol or someone mentioned earlier the fact that the goals document that we had produced previously might be woven in here or might be duplicated in some respects. So we might want to look at that also as we do this.
Well, we can discuss that. My preference would be to have a standalone recommendation document, that these are the committee's recommendations. We have produced other documents and they certainly can stand on their own also. But let's plan then on meeting in 2 weeks, same time, same place.
Same
And,
station.
and we can go from there.
Sounds good.
Oh, you know what? That's the day of city council's retreat.
No, you're correct.
Just looked at my calendar.
Well, so half the committee won't be here, in other words.
So,
Or change the meeting date for us.
yeah, we may just skip the next meeting and meet on the 22nd.
Would that work to stretch it out to
Of
May
May?
22nd?
Yeah.
Let's see. It works
Or
for
let's-
me.
Okay, let's go forward. So the next meeting should be the 8th, right?
Yeah, ordinarily.
Okay,
But now we have. a
Yeah.
holiday.
But we'll shoot for May 22nd.
is that okay for you, Kurt?
Yay.
Time always-
Yeah,
Time always helps.
Oh, yes, all right,
that sounds good.
yeah, I don't think I've been,
There's that, very true, but
I don't know when.
oh,
Making a few notes here. Okay, any other discussion that we need to have here this morning?
I will continue to monitor what's happening in the legislature regarding, and I think so far it's only this one bill. And the bill is not just about electric utilities, there's a lot in there about gas utilities, so we'll see if it goes through.
Okay. Sounds good. Thank you all for being here and we'll adjourn until next time and we look forward to seeing Steve, your stuff and Kirk, some kind of draft.